Welcome, everyone. It's so great to see you. Today, we have an unprecedented opportunity to discuss a very interesting book here. Let me just thank each and every one of the authors, the editors, our guests, our friends from the Defense Academy of the United Kingdom. Obviously, ITSS Verona. This is a joint ITSS King's College London event. A very welcome, heartfelt welcome to Racheal Atley from the Counterterrorism Executive Directorate in New York. Racheal, welcome and thank you. You honor us with your presence. Another very heartfelt welcome and greetings to our American friends who may not be able to see us live, but who are definitely going to watch the recording. So greetings to the U.S. Department of State, to MPSF in Monterey, to our friends from the FBI, USAID, and obviously, most importantly, the Indo-Pacific Command. So welcome everyone to all of our guests. Today, as I was saying, we have a great opportunity to discuss this book entitled Vulnerability and Resilience to Violent Extremism, an Actor-Centric Approach, which is the product of the PAVE project. This one is of particular interest, if I may say, because it offers a very thorough and yet very good picture of the MENA region and the Balkans, two regions that are not always taken together, zooming in on various scenarios from a number of countries that continue to build resilience vis-a-vis violent extremism. And now, before we actually go to the authors and the editors who are going to walk us through their research, paving the way, setting the scene for a very interesting round of discussion with our CTED representative from the United Nations, let me quickly introduce all of them before I actually give them the floor. So Véronique Dudouet is a senior advisor at the Conflict Transformation Research Department, Berghof Foundation in Berlin, where she has been working since 2005. She holds an MA and a PhD in conflict resolution from the University of Bradford in the United Kingdom. She was the coordinator of the EU Horizon 2020 research project PAVE. So this one from 2020 to 2023. Véronique, welcome and thank you for being with us. Johanna-Maria Hülzer, and apologies for probably not pronouncing it correctly, works in the Conflict Transformation Research Department at Berghof Foundation in Berlin, like Véronique, where she's part of the coordinating team of the PAVE project on community resilience to violent extremism. She has an MA in international affairs from the Hertie School in Berlin. Johanna-Maria, very welcome. Partner and lead in various international projects, Maja Halilovic-Pastuovic is an assistant research professor at the School of Religion at Trinity College Dublin, where she teaches in the areas of sociology of peace and conflict, sociology of identity, ethnicity, and ethnopolitics. Amongst the many roles she covers, Maja is a radicalization and violent extremism and radicalization expert for Western Balkans as part of the Radicalization Awareness Network. Maja, welcome. Juline Beaujouan is a postdoctoral research fellow with the Peace and Conflict Resolution Evidence Platform, PeaceRap, based at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. She has a PhD from Durham University, where she was awarded the Al-Sabah Fellowship and acted as a member of the AHCR's Open World Research Initiative. Juline, very welcome, and thank you for coming. Author of numerous publications on Palestinian refugees, youth, violence, social movements, violent extremism, and many other topics. Marie Kortam is a co-founder of the Cedar Center for Legal Studies in Lebanon. Amongst the many initiatives she either leads or cooperates with, Marie is a human rights and security research policy advisor at the Lebanese Palestinian Dialogue Committee in Lebanon, and an associate researcher at the French Institute of the Near East, IFPO Beirut, and a member of the Arab Council for Social Sciences. Marie, very welcome and thank you for being here. Amjed Rasheed is an assistant professor in the Defense Studies Department at King's College London. He holds a PhD in politics from Durham University. Before his tenure at King's College London, Amjed held academic positions at Tübingen University's Institute of Political Science from 2020 to 2021, and Lancaster University's Department of Politics, Philosophy and Religion from 2022 and 2023. Amjed, you're very welcome. And then last but not least, Racheal Atley is the head of political analysis and research at the Counterterrorism Committee as executive directorate in New York with ITSS Verona friend Dr. Davis Caria, who was with us in Verona last December for a very memorable conference. And Racheal has previously worked as a senior policy advisor at the permanent mission of the UK to the United Nations. Racheal, thank you so much for being here with us today. We tremendously appreciate that. Now, team, given that we have a pretty fair amount of very interesting speakers, I'm just gonna obviously leave the floor to them. I'm just going to pace, right? So I mean, so the overall discussion. So please, the only thing that I kindly ask is just to stick with the timings, right? So which are fairly packed, but we're just going to start off with the background and the rationale of the PAVE project by Véronique and Johanna. Then we're going to move to the state actors with Maja. Then we're going to focus on the religious actors with Juline and Amjed. And then we are going to concentrate on the role the civil society plays still with Vero and Marie. Then each of the speakers is going to have the floor for very brief recommendations, right? So, and lessons learned. And then last but not least, we're going back to Racheal for her intervention. And then provided that obviously we still have time, it would be very interesting to have a short round of Q&A. So without any further ado, to present the general background and rationale of the PAVE project, which pretty much inspired this book. Veronique and Johanna, whenever you want, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Many thanks, Michele, and it's a great pleasure for me to be rejoining indeed my co-editors and former collaborators in the PAVE project, and it's a great pleasure to be sharing those lessons learned with those of you joining on live, and for those of you who will be able to watch the recording afterwards. I've agreed with Johanna that I'm going to be presenting the indeed background and introduction to the project that led to this book, and then Johanna will come later on for some recommendations at the end. So maybe I will share my screen just to show one slide, if that's all right. Maybe you can help me, allow me to share the screen, Michele, just to give you a snapshot of what project looks like.
Yeah, you should be able to do that, Veronique.
It's not working, but it's all right. I can also do without. Okay, let me just start for now. So the project PAVE was a 3-year collaborative research project, which was funded by the EU Horizon 2020 framework. And it consisted of 13 partner organizations from 12 countries in the EU, in the Western Balkans, and in the Middle East and North Africa. And I think some of the contributors to the book that are from some of those regions might also join us today. So it's great if maybe they can also come in later in the discussion. And sorry, Michele. It's fine. I'll just continue without the slides, no worry. So the overall focus of the book and of the project that lies behind it takes a meso-level approach to the factors of vulnerability and resilience to violent extremism. So by meso-level, we mean a focus on the dynamics that take place within communities, between communities, and between state and society. But we also take, of course, into account so macro-level factors, structural factors, the role of the state, but also micro factors such as individual trajectories and push and pull factors of violent extremism. So in order to conduct this work, the data was collected in 7 countries across the regions that I've mentioned. So we had Kosovo, North Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Lebanon, Iraq, and Tunisia. All of those countries are covered in the book. And the data was collected primarily through qualitative methods of interviews, focus groups, and contact analysis. The teams that conducted this work were very multidisciplinary. So we are not only political scientists, we're also grateful to have sociologists and social psychologists and religious experts among us. So the reason why we decided to embark on this book was to make sure that the findings from our 3-year research could be disseminated to a wider audience, that what EU project deliverables can allow for. And so we were very happy that we could publish this as part of the Routledge series, Encountering Violent Extremism, which is a series led by Dr. This means that Michele is out. No, he's still here. Okay. So we decided in the book to focus on an actor-centric approach. That's part of the title of the book. Since in our research, we decided to look at vulnerability and resilience to violent extremism as very much agency-based approaches where community leaders play an active role. So by community leaders, we meant, or we looked at certain actors that have the ability to influence the beliefs, the discourses, the actions, and the social interactions among their peers. They are perceived by community members, and by communities we mean something that could be anything from a municipality to a shared identity based on religion or ethnicity, for example. So they are perceived by those community members as having authority, trust, legitimacy, and influence over them. So we looked at a wide variety of actors that we defined as community leaders, ranging from state representatives at the national or local level, and elected officials, but also public servants, police officers, religious leaders, traditional leaders, and of course, civil society leaders of all sorts, including NGOs, but also the media, youth groups, educators, actors that are involved in culture, arts, and sports, and so forth. So this was a very inclusive approach to community leadership, I would say. And in the book, we look at the complex web of relations between all of those actors, and also the degree of cooperation, coordination, or rivalry, or antagonism, or co-optation between those actors. The book tries to focus on not only factors of vulnerability, but also factors of resilience. Now, we are aware that this concept of resilience has become a buzzword in the PCVE community, and there's been a lot of critiques against this term. It's been criticized for being sometimes depoliticizing certain actors, for maybe focusing too much on how individuals have to cope with the situation, and it's not always looking at the deep structural drivers of extremism. But we still decided to use this term and to reclaim it and to give us some strong sense of focus around what we see as the capacity of communities to prevent or to react to the threat of terrorism, or extremism rather, and to resist the root factors as well as the manifestations of violence. So I think we will be hearing from all of the other contributors about the fact that resilience is not necessarily inherently positive, and different forms of resilience can interact, can clash, can contradict, can compete with one another. So the last thing I want to say before briefly talking about the structure of the book is that indeed we are taking a comparative perspective by looking at 2 regions of the European neighborhood that are rarely studied together. So the Western Balkans on the one hand, and the Middle East and North Africa on the other hand. And we think that those 2 regions share common patterns of radicalization or de-radicalization and violent extremism, despite the fact that they have very distinct historical, political, or cultural trajectories, and also distinct relations with the European Union. So the book is organized around 3 main blocks of actors. So it starts with a theory chapter that reviews key terms, key trends in the research on PCV. Then we have 3 main parts, as I said, that focus on 3 blocks of actors. So state actors, religious actors, and civil society actors. And finally, the conclusion brings back together the findings and looks at the implications for policy. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop it here, and I look forward to the colleagues presenting the more concrete findings on those sets of actors, and then very happy to come back at the end for brief recommendations and for hopefully a rich discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Johanna, would you like to add something as for, again, the background and the rationale?
Thank you, Michele. I think at that point here, Véronique covered the introduction, but I'm happy to come back when we all share our comments.
Very good, very good, very good. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much for that. And now, now moving on to the actors, Maja, whenever you want, floor is yours.
I would also like to share screen. Is it possible?
You should be able to do that.
Yes. Yes. Just won't be able to, sorry. Right, you can see that, yes? You can hear me. Great, thank you. I was an editor for the section that dealt with the state, and our findings are related to a general finding of the whole PAVE project, and that is that prevention measures, the way they're implemented currently in most of the states, are problematic and often do not work in post-conflict societies. So we discovered that there is a conflict to radicalization and violent extremism trajectory, that it's present across both regions, where conflict led to failed reconciliation, a lot of polarization in all societies, and then further radicalization in different shapes and form, in different settings, but in all of them, this dynamic is present. So due to this dynamic, different forms of new forms, unique forms of extremism have been developed in these regions: ethnopolitical extremism, ethno-religious extremism, and sectarian extremism. So if we are going to talk about state, which we do in this section, it's very important to acknowledge broadly that these new extremisms are in many ways interconnected with the states that exist in these regions. So I'll give you a couple of examples from the chapters in the book. So in Western Balkans, this is broadly connected to ethnocracies and ethnopolitics. Basically, in all 4 countries that we researched and worked with, states are directly involved in contributing to development of extremism in the region through being ethno-states, through being focused on ethnicity as a main way of being. And this ethnicity is connected to the nation states that exist there. So Goran and Nemanja wrote a chapter on Serbia. And in this case, they discuss a very unique patron-client relationship between the state and Serbian far-right organizations that have developed in the region via 1990s extreme nationalism. So this is what they term clientelistic parastatal system that replaced formal institutions. So in a way, how this developed is that violence have been outsourced in post-conflict societies in three different ways. It was outsourced to the criminal underground, and also very often related to the hooligan football groups. It was also outsourced to the ideology of Greater Serbia and extreme nationalism through Šešelj and Drašković, who know the region, and also through the local Serb leaders from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I don't want to go into more details about it. You can read the chapter, but basically criminal element has penetrated the state system, and it has also enabled extremism and normalization of extremist narratives. Now, this is a vulnerability. But to come back to what Vera was saying at the beginning, it is also bizarrely and paradoxically what they call resilience paradox. It's also a form of violence control. So, for example, number of far-right extremist and nationalist groups that would have been problematic against the states have been incorporated into the state system now and operate in this para-statal way. So we're seeing control of violence by the actual state. In the MENA region, 2 chapters deal with Iraq and Lebanon, and I am no expert. Juline and Amjed can take the questions related to Iraq because they wrote this fabulous chapter. But again, interestingly, what we see there is that what is often been seen by West as a very fragile state, Iraq, for number of years, it's actually a very strong and resilient state. And strong in a sense that it didn't collapse, that keeps persevering, that it's not disappearing. So by staying there in its complex form, which I would say a couple of words later, it actually prevents Iraqi communities, it prevents Iraqi people to fight against violent extremism. So it's this reinforcing loop. The state's resilience undermines community resilience in this setting. They also in this chapter give a talk about that we have to critically account, which Vera mentioned again in introduction, for the concept of resilience and understand that state can be a driver of extremism. They also talk about concept of state of no state, al-Ladavla, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, where the state that exists there is consisting of elements that are inside and outside the states. So different elitists, powerful families, for example, can be part of this new configuration of state. So again, vulnerability and resilience are problematized there. In relation to Lebanon, Rudaina talks about the role of hybrid state institutions where state and actors cooperate. She also talks about hybrid sovereignty, plural governments, a security assemblage. So she actually analyzed Dar el-Fatwa, which is a formal Sunni religious institution, and implementation of preventive measures there, or rather inability to do that because of its relationship with the state, where she criticizes financial subordination, amongst other things, and lack of control over religious education. Again, MENA partners can say more about that, but summarize, I'm aware of my time, across all chapters in this section, resilience and vulnerability are not understood in this dichotomous way that most of the literature to date has done, but are problematized and discussed further. So I leave it at that, and I hope that was clear. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Maja. Very, very clear. And also thank you for offering us a very interesting overview of a number of realities that cannot be categorized so much like into the so-called like Western Westphalian philosophy, right? So, but everything is very context dependent, and even the way through which we can or we may assess resilience may change. Right. It was actually very funny that you said that a number of countries or governments were not considered resilient maybe by a number of Western factors, but in fact, in reality, they were, right? So just the unit of measurement changes, and the perspective is also very, very important. So thank you very much for that. And with that being said, we move from state actors to another very important element in both regions, which obviously are the religious actors. And so without any further ado, Juline and Amjed, whenever you want, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. I'll take it over and then hand the floor to Amjed. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I will be providing a very short, I promise, outline of the second part of the book, where we try to revisit the nexus between religion and violent extremism. And the 3 case studies that are presented in the book are the cases of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Lebanon, and Tunisia. What we try to do in the 3 chapters is to offer a bit of a different perspective from what tends to be portrayed in the academic literature, in the policy discourse, and in the media alike, which is the fact that violent extremism is a purely religious phenomenon, especially when we look at certain regions such as the Middle East and North Africa. And because religion is perceived as an enabler of violent extremism, religious actors have long been completely excluded from PCV strategies. We believe that while this is not completely erroneous, this is quite a reductionist perspective, to say the least. As we've heard from my co-editors before, violent extremism is a multi-dimensional cumulative process. And in that sense, ethno-political or sectarian manifestations of violent extremism are as relevant as religiously inspired violent extremism. What we realized looking at all those different case studies is that in a number of contexts, religion is often used as a tool of resistance against the state. And yes, it could be instrumentalized by violent extremist organizations to mobilize the masses, to recruit members, to justify the struggles. However, if we look at the other side of the coin, we realize that local communities also use religion as a tool to resist the state's hegemonic powers when they are faced with exclusion, oppression, or injustice. And that's why religious actors can facilitate PCV in their local communities. This is because religion plays an important role in everyday life, at least in some societies. This is because religious leaders act as a power configuration actors in the societies, and this is because they can hold a very high degree of legitimacy, authority, and trust with local communities. Something quite important I want to mention is that in the 3 chapters we chose to focus on both formal and informal religious actors. This is because in the post-conflict societies of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Lebanon, and Tunisia, as we just heard from Maja, the state is fragmented, and while not just weak, it fails to deliver a strong political legal system that reaches all communities. And so we end up with a hybrid system where a number of religious institutions and leaders act beyond the state. For instance, they act beyond the Ministry of Religious Endowment, but at the same time, they constantly interact with the political order and either legitimize it or delegitimize it. And the final thing I want to mention before I hand the floor over to Amjed is that in that book, we do argue for a multi-stakeholder approach that includes religious actors, but we also use those 3 case studies to show that PCV approaches must be context sensitive and they must account for the relationship between the state and religion in each context. This is because this relation is often very complex, especially in post-colonial contexts where the process of state formation or state consolidation is still ongoing. In addition to that, religious actors can be very entangled in sectarian institutions that can play a role in repressive or corrupted political system. And to finish with, when engaging with religious actors in PCV, it is really important to adopt a very light-footed approach to avoid 2 things. The first thing is to avoid delegitimizing the role of religious leaders themselves, if, for instance, they become to be perceived as pursuing a foreign agenda, if the program is implemented by an international NGO, for instance. And the second thing, to avoid delegitimizing the state itself, if religious leaders become perceived as promoting a different form of political legal organization of the society. I hope I was good time-wise. Amjed, I'm going to hand it over to you. Amjed is going to, thank you, Michele. Amjed is going to provide some more detailed analysis about those 3 case studies. Thank you.
Should I go ahead, Michele? I'm not sure if I'm going to provide any detailed analysis, but it's always hard to follow you, Juline. But thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Vero, for the overview, and Maja for really contextualizing this rather intrinsically linked this complex relationship between the state and the society. Probably what I would like to say, a general probably for the audience, a general comment about the book in general. This book is highly based on raw material, so it's not a composition. It's actually based on raw data and hundreds of interviews. And that's why I really value this rather cooperation with all the consortium. A second thing is that, speaking of the section of the book in itself, those 3 case studies, yes, they are similar in a certain way, but also they are different in one way or another. Similarities, especially when it comes to Lebanon and Bosnia and Herzegovina, given the nature of the composition of the society, you will see that there is this. While we speak of religious institutions, or in that section, or at least we edited it through these chapters, we always refer to the state. We always refer somehow to Maja's section of how this give and take relationship between the state and the society. Yes, religious institutions, especially the informal religious institutions, are product of conflict, as Maja has alluded to it. This cycle of conflicts usually, disrupt society, transform society. It also produces new actors. So in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, you have religious institutions that actually act actively when it comes to PVE activities, either through religious education or through working with interlocutors to basically achieve compromises. They're also through their social network. They also have been able to cease fire. In the case of Racheal, for example, Hayat Ulama al-Muslimin or the Lebanese League of Muslim Scholars has been instrumental in that respect. So yes, you have religious institutions. Religion could be, whether from a patrimonial perspective, used as an ideology to basically lead to violence, or from an instrumental approach in which religion is basically mobilized or used by political reasons. In which way you take it, you will also find down the road that those religious institutions can also play a positive role when it comes to PVE. And the case of the Islamic community, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Lebanese League, Hayat Ulama al-Muslimin, the Lebanese League of Muslim Scholars, has shown that religious institutions can also play a role, an instrumental role, when it comes to community resilience, as Véronique alluded into it, a concept that we had long discussions about it. So I'll stop here. Give time for the rest of the speakers to have their own time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Juline. Thank you very much, Amjed. So important, also so very connected to the section of the book that Maja edited. I guess that another very interesting point that you're making through the lines is that, especially from this part of the world, we cannot overly generalize. I mean, so we got to understand the context, even when it comes to religion. Well, it's complicated, obviously. And I know that to you, right, so this may seem like very simplistic, but to a number of us, maybe it is not, right? So, and therefore, it is always very good to reiterate the complexity of the territory, the composition of the religious community, what they do, what is their interpretation of a number of visions of religion? How are they connected with the government? How are they connected with guess what? I mean, so civil society, right? So which is the other part that we're going to ponder over just in a few bits, and how all of this can be used either to do very, very, very bad or very good, right? And so, you know, thank you very much, like, for a very interesting overview. And with that being said, it will be very stimulating to hear what civil society can do within this picture, right? So with states, right? So, and with big religious actors in these two regions of the world. So without any further ado, Véronique, back to you, and then back to Marie. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Michele. I mean, I think we'll directly go to Marie. We had put my name there in case she wasn't able to join, but I'm so happy she's with us. So I'm very happy for her to lead that discussion on civil society.
That's good.
Thank you, Vero. Thank you, Michele, and thank you for hosting us to discuss our book. Thanks for the colleagues. So I will go straight to the civil society because we will see that civil society in all the case studies and all the countries are civil society organizations were present to fill the gap of the governments, of the lack of trust and lack of accountability in the government of the country in the study. So Maja already exposed this part of states and government, and the religious actor, we will find them very involved in the MENA region and in the Balkans as civil society actors. So the choice to focus on the book of civil society emerge from the field, and especially when we are looking for the factors of resilience in the country of the case studies. In this part we choose in the book, we choose to demonstrate and to analyze how the civil society organization provide a space for constructive engagement between the state and individuals groups. So these three chapters focus on Kosovo. Of course, much more countries were covered in the project, but in the book there is three case studies focus on Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Lebanon. In these three countries, the interaction involves horizontal coordination among government actors and public institutions, such as the police, Ministry of Health, Justice, Education, and Social Services, on the one hand, and vertical coordination between governmental institutions and civil society on the other. The international institution and agency are giving civil society an increasing significant role in the definition and implementation of development policy, in which the state is no longer the only hegemonic actor. And in the field of PCVE, we find that government have the responsibility to ensure the security and respect of human rights, because they are implementing all the strategy of PCVE in the countries. But this implementing are held or led by the government, but in the field it's leading by the government, but it's implementing by civil society organization because of many reasons. Maybe we can have the time to answer it in the Q&A. And in these countries of studies, the CSO in these countries emerge in post-war environment after ethnopolitical, intercommunity, or sectarian armed conflict. As a result of the war, a weak state emerged, and community entities have consolidated at the expense of national governmental structures. So I will go now directly to the three case studies. I will start by Kosovo. For Kosovo, Ramadan, Ardet, and Dorjita the author of the chapter, highlight the inter-ethnic relations and the ethnopolitical way which Maja talk about it, and they explain the process of the PVE strategy, the new PVE strategy implemented in 2023 by the government in Kosovo. But the common element for the three countries is that the community approach don't respect or that there is no a genuine approach from the root-based or from the community-based approach, because it depends on the international agenda from one side, and it's what they called in Kosovo extended arm of the West. I will not talk about more findings in this, considering this civil society in Kosovo. I will go directly to the North Macedonia. The chapter was written by Yanis and Bledar from Eliamep, our partner in the project, and they highlight the role of the education, the international community in the PVE strategy, and what civil society organization can do, especially to deal with this not sectarian, segregated education in North Macedonia. And finally, in Lebanon, as you know, Lebanon is a deeply sectarian country with 18 religious official groups. So the implementing of the strategy leading by the government in Lebanon try to deal with all the Sunni cities, because the program is the PVE stopped now because the lack of funding, but the initial strategy was mainly implemented in three Sunni cities, big Sunni cities in the country, with jointly with the Strong Cities network. We don't have the time now to talk and to expose the program of the Strong Cities network. They are working in Saida, in Tripoli, in Majd al-Anjar, in Lebanon, and they involved especially religious actors, and working on the hadith and on the Quranic text with schools and with teachers from all these cities. So you will find all these details in the book, but to conclude, the civil society is doing this role of bridging between community and government in the three countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie, especially for this very last remark. People matter, right? So, and when there's no government, right? So, or what we believe to be like weaker forms of government, fractured societies, and something that actually that's where the people come out. And so, like, thank you very much for this. I have lots of questions, but hopefully we'll manage to ask a few in a little bit. So, before giving the word to Racheal from CTED, the United Nations. Very quickly, I would like to actually start over and just go back to you, Vero and Johanna, and so, and then going to Maja, Juline, Amjed, and then back to you, Mary, with any concluding remarks, lessons learned, or recommendations that you see fit for this. So, if it is okay with you, Vero and Johanna, we'll start with you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michele. Johanna, do you want to start?
Yes, I mean, I'm happy to start. So I think from my side, I would like to highlight 2 points that I consider as 2 lessons learned that kind of stuck with me from the work on the book. And I think the first one really relates to, you know, the relevance of social authority beyond the state that we see inhibited in all these, types of different actors that are relevant and that we consider on the community level. So really like these community-rooted sources of leadership, of authority that go beyond the state or that don't necessarily are the state, that I think we often kind of are at danger to neglect if we don't really are context specific and look into the context, as also already was mentioned throughout this conversation. And I think the second point that I would like to highlight is how important it is to bring violent extremism and conflict studies closer together. I mean, as Maja already also noted in her theory part, on this book, this kind of conflict to radicalization cycle is so helpful to understand the legacies of the past in violent extremism and also the root causes. So yeah, I think these were the two lessons learned that stuck with me.
Great, thanks a lot, Johanna. Really hard to pick and choose from the from the conclusions and policy recommendations which we have at the end. Maybe two that I feel strongly about. Maybe more general points. The first one is that what we found, and it's also of course been confirmed by the rest of the scholarship around this topic, is that despite our focus on sources of vulnerability and communities that are deeply affected by that violent narratives, attitudes and behavior, of course, we found that across all of those countries, even in places where there's conditions and fertile ground for what could call violent extremism to flourish, most communities, in fact, remain unaffected, remain resilient. And so I would say violent extremism is the exception rather than the rule. And that's why what we were trying to understand with that study is that how communities manage to overcome those structural conditions that could lead them to become radicalized and to avoid doing so. And then for me, the other important point and an important reminder is that ultimately the problem is not religion, is not ideology. The problem is violence, and I think, the focus in all of the research that we've conducted and the recommendations that we've had and the discussions we have with policymakers and how to focus on the problem of violent behavior, while looking, of course, at the attitudes and the structures that are driving that, but not forgetting that, in the end, it's about violence prevention. I think I'll leave it at that for now. Happy to hear what examples and conclusions the others want to pick up on.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Thank you very much, Véronique. Maja, whenever you want, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief and very clear. I'll build on Johanna's comment and on my short presentation. We need new model of prevention of violent extremism in post-conflict societies that takes into account legacies of the conflict and the new forms of extremism that are developing there. Thank you.
Thank you, Maja. With that being said, now Juline and then Amjed, floor is yours.
Yes, I won't be as short as also very general points, building upon what has been said before. And here, this is maybe the message I'm trying to send across my screen to our colleagues in Europe, in the States. Do not disengage. I think we do need all the diplomatic skills in the world in order to approach that problem. And not disengaging, or I should say maybe engaging meaningfully, means three things. It means not just understanding violence, but understanding structural violence beyond active armed conflicts, because this is really what creates grievances and what accumulates in order to eventually lead to extremism and violent extremism. The second thing is that purely security approaches obviously do not work. PCV is development, and I'm happy to develop on this a bit later. And the final thing is that we need multi-stakeholder approaches that are rooted in local contexts in order to reach out to the people. Yes, what Mary said is incredibly important. People do matter. Thank you.
Wow, really, really rich. Well, what I personally would like to take, at least personally, from all this, from this project is that, coming from that part of the world, there is this issue of, some of the scholars call it the overstating state of the state. There is this relationship, you alluded to it quite elegantly, Michele, as well, this dualic relationship between the society and the state. The state in the Middle East, in West Asia, North Africa, wherever you like to name it, is still in the process of consolidation after 100 years of the establishment of contemporary Middle East. The exogenous processes of state formation remain key drivers, or not key drivers, are contributing maybe drivers of identity politics. A movement of refugees across borders are contributing to this. And at the heart of it, there is something that we did not touch upon it in the book. What is really important for us, engagement, as Juline said, is important. PVE would rather, as also to build on what Maja said, would rather to come up with new approaches, not only cases specific. This is something that I would also take it with me. I would avoid generalization. I would avoid theories. I don't think they matter. I don't think they are useful. Cases specific are I think the new trend that we should take. What really matters here, building on what Maja said, is that I forgot my point. It's the state and the societies are building on each other, and probably a better PVE strategy, either reinforced from or introduced from outside or from inside, it will need to include corruption as an element to tell those governments that are in power, to this elite-based politics in Lebanon, Iraq, anywhere in the region or in the Balkans, that hey, you need to end corruption. It's because of corruption that this element of conflict really persists. Radicalization and lead to conflict, as the colleagues have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amjed. By the way, don't worry too much, right? So the corruption element resonates a lot with Italians, right? So that's absolutely fine. No, but jokes aside, Juline, Amjed, thank you very much. Last but not least, Marie, back to you for your general conclusions, so lessons learned or recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, I will have two lesson learned or recommendation. One concerning the civil society and one more general. So the first one is about I already talked about it, and it was stressed by all the colleagues. The agency of civil society should be taken into consideration, and the donor agenda also should promote a genuine local understanding or approach to the radicalization process. The second one, we need a human rights approach into PVE to take into consideration social justice, access to justice, the rule of law, and equal resource distribution within the countries, within the region, and within the whole world. Thank you. Thank you, Michele.
Thank you very much, Marie. Racheal, you have a seemingly ungrateful task right now, is just to make something out of all the amount of great information that we have heard. I know it may seem daunting, but actually very stimulating. So, as said, full freedom of maneuver on your end, but we're just very curious, right? So, as to what you think of this whole discussion, and then if you want, obviously, you can link it back to what you as CTED are doing, right? So as to addressing violent extremism, even in this part of the world. So Racheal, whenever you want, the floor is yours for the final bit, and then we can open up to just a few Q&A. Thank you, Racheal.
Thank you very much, and a huge thank you to ITSS and your partners for inviting CTED and myself to join this conversation. And of course, I wouldn't dare try and summarize these points because I'm deeply unqualified. But what I can do is talk a little bit about what it means to the United Nations and the work that we're doing in New York and around the world. So if you're not familiar, for anyone who may not be right across what our exact mandate is, CTED travels from country to country, in theory, all members of the United Nations, although we have visited to date 119 different countries to conduct assessments of their compliance with Security Council resolutions on counterterrorism. It's essentially an audit, and we'll spend 10 days in a country around about assessing all manner of their frameworks and policies in compliance with Security Council resolutions. And we're also mandated to engage with civil society and academia to ensure that the advice that we give member states is grounded in evidence-based research. And so for that reason, I'm very grateful to be here. This is the kind of engagement that's really critical to our work at CTED. And as is noted in the book, from about the mid-2010s, the Security Council began to expand the language and frameworks it was using on counterterrorism to integrate more direction to member states on building effective community resilience strategies, engaging with the media, civil society, religious leaders, educators. And also to consider the role of youth in creating a peace culture. And it is something that Security Council is increasingly taking very seriously. So one example of that is the Counterterrorism Committee, which is a subsidiary body of the Security Council and made up of the same members, has an annual meeting on countering terrorist narratives, preventing violent extremism conducive to terrorism. And it's the only meeting that is mandated annually of the Counterterrorism Committee. So it is clearly seen as something that's incredibly important. You can watch the most recent one online. It happened, I think, last month, and it was based on community resilience, and it featured some really impressive speakers, including a research institute from Africa, some UN project implementers, as well as a few civil society representatives, including Civil Societies Network, Strong Cities Network, which is a organization whose work Marie was talking about earlier. So yeah, have a look at that on our website, and you can watch it online, and as well as access all of the documents associated with the meeting. Just before I finish up, I also want to highlight something that several of the authors documented in the book that you're presenting today, which is gender, and the clear research base and the evidence that show the extent to which gender is manipulated and gender dynamics and masculinities are manipulated in radicalization and recruitment strategies of terrorist movements and violent extremist movements, the extent to which those dynamics are baked into ideologies and recruitment strategies. And if governments really are going to address the problem of violent extremism, they must have a gender strategy incorporated into their policies. CTED did a paper on masculinities about 2 years ago. It's on our website. We partnered with the International Peace Institute to begin to highlight some of that research, but really it is something that we really appreciate researchers continuing to examine and offer recommendations to policymakers. So that's just a few things from me in New York, but thank you again for your invitation. Thank you again. This kind of engagement really is critical for how we do our work. So we look forward to ongoing engagement. Thank you.
No, thank you, Racheal. And also, the work that you're doing in New York is obviously very, very, very important. And the meetings, the conferences, the getting together, right? So they are essential just to bridge the gap, right? So between academia and policymakers and civil society. So obviously, thank you very much. And you're always a very welcome guest. Before we do open up the floor like for questions and comments, let me just very briefly say hello to Mr. John Williams from the U.S. Department of State, right? So who's joining us from Hawaii, right? So and who we really thank expressly for all his support that he has given both King's and ITSS Verona with major connections in the United States. John, I know you cannot speak now, but thank you for making it. It really means a lot, particularly given that this is a bank holiday for people like you in the States. That said, everyone, any questions or comments for our guests on anything that they have said? And so there was quite a lot, right? So I do have a number of questions, but you know, my wife always says that I speak too much, that I talk too much. So you know, I'd rather leave the floor. Yeah, so Julia said that she has already acquired the book. Very good. Good for you, Julia. Good stuff. Any questions or comments? Julia, would you like to ask something, or anybody? Omri.
Oh, yes. Thank you for saying that, Michele. I was just going to say, number one, thank you for this comprehensive research and work. I am really, I'm anxious to start looking into it, and I think it can can help share information across different contexts and different motivations and drivers, which is something that many researchers, we want to understand. How can we get to, let's say, how the way we say it in Peru, how do we get to the mother of the lamb and really nail this down? How to really contribute in a way to ease this conflict and these problems in a very structural way. So thank you very much, and thank you to King's College and ITSS Verona for organizing this.
Thank you, Julia. You're always very, very kind. So just breaking the ice, right? So because Racheal mentioned something about gender, right? So and just conscious of the time, right? So because it wasn't really there here, but it's in the book. So does any of you would like to share something very particular that they have seen in a specific country, right? So that could absolutely resonate with our discussion. How can a more pronounced like gender dimension help counter violent extremism in a number of realities? I mean, so for instance.
Oh, yes, there is this book from the researcher's name, escape of my mind. I can send it to you later, Michele, to distribute. It's a professor in King's College London. She was in Peru for a few years, understanding how gender patterns affect all the extremism, the internal conflict that we suffer for more than a decade, pretty much 2 decades, accentuately, very strongly, and how these gender patterns affected not only the co-opting and the recruitment, but also the victimology, and how all that affected always the people that is the most vulnerable from both sides, from the terrorists or the militants or non-state combatants to the special forces counter-terrorism, acting in counter-terrorism from the government. So yes, I think we were also researching for the case of Afghanistan for our report. And we see similar patterns, right? How come patriarchy and how come gender becomes another way to oppress? So it's a multi-layer, and this pays in the worst way for women that are mothers or at the center of the community, because in many not or less capitalist contexts, the role of women in the community, like articulators and sustainers of cultural heritage and social structures, is fundamental. So I think this book and this discussion will enlighten in that regard and expand the research further, discovering new avenues, not only to tackle terrorism, but also to tackle oppressive gender patterns.
Thank you very much, Julia. For those of you who do not know, we are doing, as ITSS, research that was actually started with members from CTED, right? So just touching upon cultural heritage, right? So, and we are adding the gender dimension. So Julia, like, thank you very much. Hopefully Racheal will be presenting this soon. But now, obviously, let's go back to Juline, then Maja, and then we have a question from Sonia, right? So, but Juline and then Maja. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Michele, and thank you very much, Julia, for offering that perspective from a continent we have not had the chance to study yet. I just wanted to say that what we realize across the context that are featured in that book is that, yes, women are very vulnerable to indoctrination by radical narratives. This is usually because of a combination of factors. They're usually very cultural factors, so tribal conservatism, patriarchal dominance, and so on and so forth, but also economic hardship. This is a really, really important thing that I think exists in all societies, regardless of the culture, of the religion, of the ethnicity, and so on and so forth. However, on the positive side, women also play a vital role in PCV because they work in social organizations, they work in schools, they work in families, obviously. And because of their presence, they are very well placed to identify early symptoms of extremism, of violence in their communities. And yet, despite of this very vital role, they are still very much underrepresented in leadership positions across state, across society, in any kind of positions, really, in any kind of group that can have an impact on PCV, on violence in general. Those are only the only things I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Juline. Maja, please.
I again would be very practical, Racheal, because I understand you are looking for some kind of practical advice. So since we are talking about post-conflict, wartime rape was a massive issue in Western Balkans in particular. So I think it would be very useful. There are a number of female organizations on the ground in all four countries in the Western Balkans and on all sides of the conflict who are working with this trauma and who are working on healing and reconciliation. If there are ways that that network can be supported across the borders, across the enemy lines, so to speak, etc., and let women lead the way out and advice in relation how to proceed, I think it would be very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maja. Véronique, back to you. And then, sorry, Véronique, and then back to Marie. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to point at one chapter because I'm seeing our friend Sadok from Tunisia is on the call, and I don't want to maybe pressure him to come in now as he's in the audience, but maybe he can later on. I wanted to give the example of the Tunisia chapter, which I think has some really interesting insights into like the way that I think what Amjed was referring to, so the hardships of women, especially rural women, but also women from the most marginal parts of the country, and contrasting this to what they call the armchair feminism, kind of the urban feminist organizations that is very liberal and that is not focusing and not acknowledging the situation of women in the more marginalized parts of the country and how that plays into the narratives that is fueling violent extremism. So I think he could say that in much better words than I could, but yeah, just for those who are interested in the topic, have a look at the Tunisia chapter as well.
Obviously, Sadok, if you do want to jump in, please, we'll be more than honored. Stop. Marie, then back to you then. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michele. I want also to highlight that we have in the civil society part in the book, give a lot of example of women initiative in PVE, and especially like, for example, in North Macedonia, the authors talk about the mother schools and segregated education, which is part of a huge network, Women Without Borders, that Julia talked about it. They work in Afghanistan and in many other countries, and how in Lebanon we have a pillar of PVE for the gender and for women in different, as Juline said, in different roles and family and in civil society organization and so on. So in this part, we stress the gender and the role of women in PCVE strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marie. And thank obviously all of you like for these very enlightening answers. We have like one more question from Sonia Martinez Giron. She's our executive director. Let me read it here like from the chat. It was mentioned that PVE needs to include anti-corruption, but how could this be implemented? So Amjed, I guess that probably this is your so-called hot potato. But Racheal, I also would like to hear this like from you after Amjed, even from a CTED perspective, because if you're going around, right, so and we are to implement this in a number of countries, including my own, right? So just not going like around the world, you know, but even including my own. How do we do that? But anyway, Amjed, and then Racheal, if this is okay with you, we'll come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia, for your question. I think I consider myself somebody who can see problems, but the one who is not able to bring solutions. So I'll try to be very, very probably politically incorrect here. I think it's a challenging issue. Yes, I said, you know, corruption is, given that from where I come from, I can see how, you know, the state operates at its elite base. In one way, obviously, if you want me to give you the formal discourse of how to end corruptions, is basically, you know, you enhance the independence of the judiciary, you improve mechanism of accountability, and you probably also enhance mechanism of transparency, and so on and so forth. However, in the at least in the case of Lebanon, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and largely in the case of Iraq, the polity is made in a way it's proportional. So proportionality in that sense means that by default, right, it's a forced collision. It's by default, it's made in a way that the government is not assertive, the government is not that strong. The government exists there, but it's not, it doesn't have this Hobbesian, you know, iron stick where it says, okay, we are going to do this. In fact, that's in proportion in countries where proportionality matters, social security, societal security, stability comes first. Means that armed conflict comes first, then the rest comes second. So governance comes second. The way I see it is that governance should come first, because, you know, coming from Kurdistan myself, I can see that, you know, now that we don't have war, yet the Kurds are still coming to Europe. Why this is the case? This is not sustainable, right? And this is a case of an example. Obviously, you have the most elegant example in explaining this relationship between political economy, corruption, and radicalization or radicalism is the case of Tunisia. Tunisia, they will either go north towards Europe, or they go east to Iraq or Syria and fight. That tells you the complexity of the issue. My understanding of it is that, as going back to the argument that I have made, the state it's in the process of consolidation. Maybe a form of multilateralism in the age of, you know, where multilateralism it's in its lowest points, given the, you know, what's happening in Ukraine, and, you know, basically the international mood is basically deviated towards the pair or state-to-state conflict. It's not, it doesn't really focus on domestic politics and radical PVE in a domestic politics. I don't know. Maybe a form of multilateralism, maybe a form of sanctions, maybe a form of you know, forcing those countries through diplomatic channels, that they should, you know, strengthen those anti-corruption mechanism. I know, I'm aware that I didn't give you an answer, but yeah, I'll leave it this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Amjed. Racheal, anything on your part, even again, like going back to CTED, right? So when it comes to corruption, anything that you would like just to share would be just golden. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And if Amjed can't solve this problem, I most definitely cannot either. But I think with topics like corruption, these are ends of themselves. These are goals that governments and the United Nations and the international community should be aspiring to anyway. It's much like development or employment programs. These are really difficult problems to solve. And if they were able to be solved, we would be doing them anyway, regardless of the impact that they have on other dimensions like violent extremism and terrorism. They're hard. Corruption itself is well beyond CTED's mandate. We leave that up to other more capable parts of the United Nations system. But even then, you know, it's very, very difficult challenge to address. So from CTED's perspective, the best we can do is come back to things and ideas like grievances or legitimacy or other very people-centered concepts that you mentioned yourself, Michele, that we really have to just bring things back to people. Respecting minorities, protecting human rights while countering terrorism. It's a huge a part of our work. We mainstream it across all the things that we do. We released a report late last year, which demonstrated that about 15% of the recommendations that CTED makes to member states relate to protecting and advocating for human rights while countering terrorism. And as always, we're promoting respect for youth, women, minority groups. So unfortunately, I also don't have an answer to you, but it's really a key focus of our work. So I'm really appreciating the discussion.
No, thank you very much, Racheal. And we do absolutely appreciate the fact that this is incredibly difficult, right? So, and the discussion could literally spiral out of control, right? With all the things that you may have to do. Right, so as member of CTED, I mean, so David was actually telling me about the same thing when we saw last each other in Verona. Everyone, before we dash, right, so just conscious of time, and before we actually wrap it up, Sadok or anybody, right, so just would like to add something, right, any questions, any comments, please just feel free to jump in before we can actually wrap it up. Now then, all right then. Everyone, huge thanks to our very distinguished guests. Right? So from the book, we absolutely champion this. We absolutely encourage, you know, just to delve deeper, right? So into the main lessons, into the challenges, into the gaps that were highlighted here. Huge thanks, Racheal. We are tremendously honored. Right, so thank you for making the time for us. Please send our best to David. We're going to be seeing each other in a month or something like this. And so you're always welcome as part of CTED to both King's and ITSS. Thank to all the ITSS Verona members. Thank you, King's. And last but not least, once again, John Williams. Once again, I thank you very much, like for putting us in a very good condition to share even the recordings with a number of agencies from the U.S. government after this. So, without anything to do, once again, like thank you and have a great night and all the best. Stay safe and take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Excellent event. Thank you. Bye.